20th century was a lousy century in economic terms. Great Depression, 2 world wars, stagnation, stagflation, Vietnam War, Cold War, huge uses of resources. Even so, it increased GDP per capita by 7-fold. If the 21st century does as badly as the lousy 20th century, the productive capacities of the system will reach towards $1 million for every family of 4, not counting inflation. You can cut that in half by for ecological and other reasons, and it's still a very, very rich society. There is a, to use a phrase, a contradiction between the emerging productive capacities and the real lives of ordinary people. This is a rich society that ought to be distributing resources, and it could be, we think of solving problems. Consider it as a vision of what could be. Life could be extraordinary in this productive capacity. We've reached the end of scarcity in that sense. But what I was trying to say is that what we're entering is a period where something is wrong and perceived to be wrong because life doesn't work, people are in trouble. And the productive capacities, and you see it in the rich, grow. Where their living style grows. And politics doesn't make sense. That is a period when people are open to both new ideas, I think, and potentially to organizing. If that's true, then the question about what is to be done becomes salient, and whether or not there's anything progressive to do. And the first thing to note is there are, in fact, people who understand this very well, and they are on the right, and they are mobilizing on the right. They are pointing out what is true, that the government-corporate complex, they don't use that language, in fact is wasteful, in fact is destroying, in fact is destroying people's lives, in fact is taxing people to benefit others, that is irrational, and they are tagging that onto the government. And they're doing a very good job of it. The fact that, in fact, that a whole system is being irrationally run is not on the table. The anger, and legitimate anger, those people protesting are legitimately angry about something. Their anger is being misdirected. There is something wrong that's going on that they sense. They don't know what it is, but there is awareness that is likely to build. So let me put it in the negative. If there is not an alternative way, down with Wall Street, nationalize the bastards, if that is not mobilized, if the tax programs are directed at the middle class rather than the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%, then there will be more anger out of the suburbs. So it is critical that progressives begin to sharpen that discussion, begin to find a way to make common cause with the legitimate anger of people who are being badly taxed, who are aware that something's wrong. So that is obvious, I think, although it is not being taken seriously. That also takes us beyond most traditional liberalism, which is based largely, as an earlier speaker talked about, the way Social Security taxes are raised, largely on taxing people in the suburbs and down in the working class, not the top. At one moment in the campaign, Obama raised a different possibility. He said take the cap off of taxes entirely, which would have meant radical taxation on all the money at the top. But that disappeared almost instantly. But that's another form of where the direction could be taken on distributional issues. It's, if you like, a populist form. What have I been saying? I'm suggesting, and now I want to return to what the Chinese call a walk-on-two-leg strategy. I'm suggesting it is very important both to develop positive, progressive alternatives in the real world, at the bottom, community, step by step, and at the same time to begin to raise very severe questions in diverting and attacking at the top, walking on two legs. So let me give you a little bit more sense of some of the things that Maria was talking about, and some of them are cataloged in my book, America Beyond Capitalism. And here's a website for you that will give you lots of information if you're interested in this, www.community-wealth.org. Put the dash in because there's another organization called Community Wealth. That catalogs the sort of thing, research, best practices that I'm going to talk about. There is an undercurrent in the United States of practical, on the ground, you can do it kind of real world changes in socializing capital and beginning to give people ordinary models of what can be done if they want to get up out of their chair and do something. So, for instance, You probably may not be aware that 120 million Americans are members of co-ops. 120 million. It is a potentially expandable group. There are something like 11,000 companies owned substantially by the workers involved in the companies in the United States. They are complex. They are not as interesting as Mondragon, most of them. Most of them are not democratic, but most of them also are moving towards democracy. More people are involved in owning their own companies in the United States today. The press doesn't cover this. More people are involved that are members of unions in the private sector. It is an interesting and developing phenomenon. 20% of American electricity is produced by co-ops and public utilities, and more efficiently and cheaper as well. There are 5,000 neighborhood corporations, mainly CDCs, some of them good, some of them bad, but involving socializing and social ownership at the neighborhood level. Not worker, but neighborhood. So I've talked about co-ops, neighborhoods, workers, public utilities. There are getting large ones as well, both in the water systems and Tennessee Valley Authority under a very bad structure of organization, non-democratic. So if you look here and there, the biggest parts of the system that are already socialized and socially owned and practical, obviously Medicare and Social Security. If you begin to peel away and begin to dramatize an ordinary experience, there's a lot going on that can be shown and built on. Michael used an example last night that I often use with my students as well. I also asked them, have you ever been involved in a socialist enterprise? And of course they looked at you crazily. And of course any university, my state university is a public enterprise, and it is socialized, it's a socialized sector. I'm suggesting the possibility now, particularly in community after community, where pain levels are growing and people are hungry for answers, there is the possibility of generating more and more models. 35 years ago, if you wanted to build a worker-owned company in the United States, there was nobody to call. There is a major historical achievement is that there is expertise and awareness all over the country of how to do it. People who really know how to do it. On all these sectors. It is an achievement historically in terms of socializing the development of knowledge. So I'm suggesting that one leg of the tractor, as the period of decay and stalemate, but not collapse, goes forward, is the reconstruction, step by step, community by community, locally, of a different model, and more important, a different idea about a model. Let me stress that. I do not think that America will overnight build its way forward in that sense. I do think there is a real possibility, the term silent revolution, of sufficient generation of practical experience to begin to flip the idea system. That people can begin to understand that there is another possibility and that they can do it in their state and in their community. Cleveland is not unique, and they can do it if they want to. There are other things that are involved in this. Social enterprise, some of you know about, which is companies that are set up and socially owned with a social mission. There's a large one in Seattle called Pioneer Services, which started out with 1% of its budget coming from its own efforts and 90% from grants. It was a drug rehab program. It began setting up companies for training. Then it began setting up work for hotels and hospitals and so forth. So the company itself funds its own social services. Again, another anarchist kind of model. But the notion I'm suggesting is that because of the pain, the potential for generating a very decentralized vision of what can be done and an idea system about that is real. From my point of view, simply to do good works, though that's important. It is to self-consciously, remember I'm talking about the person in your seat, self-consciously asking whether we can rise to the challenge of saying we will create a vision that is real, not just we're going to fight the guys.